The dust storm rolled across the Arizona plains like a living beast, swallowing the horizon in a brown, growling wall, and Matthew Callahan, lonely rancher, war veteran, and a man long forgotten by the world, was closing his barn when he saw two silhouettes stumble out of the storm. At first he thought they were coyotes or strays blown off the ridge. But when lightning ripped the sky open, he saw two young Apache girls, one barely 18, the other perhaps 20, half collapsed, trembling, clothes torn by mesquite thorns. Matthew didn't hesitate. He swung the gates wide, ran to them, and caught them both before they hit the dirt. Their lips were cracked, feet bleeding, breath shallow as if they had been running for hours. He carried them inside like fragile birds, laid them on his bed, and covered them with blankets warmed by the fire. As they drifted into unconsciousness, whispered in Apache words he couldn't understand, but their fear was unmistakable. Outside, the storm roared, the wind hammering the windows as if warning him that he had just stepped into something far bigger than a desert storm. Matthew sat beside them, lantern flickering on his tired face, wondering who in God's name they were running from and why fate had pushed them straight to his door. By dawn. The storm had passed, but the tension inside Matthew's cabin had only thickened. The older girl woke first, startled, reaching for a knife that wasn't there. When she saw him, she froze, not in fear, but in the kind of suspicion born from a lifetime of betrayal. Matthew slowly raised his hands, speaking gently, offering water and bread, watching as she studied him like a man who might still turn dangerous. The younger sister stirred next, whispering Nayland, clinging to her older sibling with the desperation of a child hiding from a nightmare. The older introduced herself as Atsila and explained in broken English that they had fled from a band of renegade hunters, men who took Apache women from remote camps to sell them across the border. Their father, Chief Yiska, leader of their band, had been searching for them, but the sisters escaped the predators only by slipping into the storm. Matthew listened, fists tightening. He fetched salve for their wounds, cleaned their cuts, and cooked a warm meal, action so gentle that Atsila's guarded gaze slowly softened. But when they learned he had given up his own bed and slept on the floor by the door, the sisters shared a look, one of gratitude, confusion, and perhaps the first glimmer of trust they'd given a stranger in years. Still, Atsila warned him. Their father was a formidable chief, fiercely protective, and if he found them here, he might assume the worst. Matthew chuckled at the threat until he saw the fear behind her eyes and realized she wasn't exaggerating. The following afternoon, Matthew stepped outside to gather water from the well and froze mid-stride. The ground around the property, normally untouched except for cattle tracks, was covered in fresh hoof prints, dozens of them, deep, heavy, moving in disciplined lines. He knelt, brushing his fingers across the impressions. They were too coordinated to be thieves, too numerous to be travelers. Apache riders, a lot of them. His pulse kicked. He walked back into the cabin, trying not to betray the worry rising in his chest. Atsila saw straight through him. She rushed outside, examined the tracks, and her face drained of color. "It is our father," she whispered. "He travels with many warriors." Matthew swallowed. There was no wrongdoing here. Yet the image of a furious Apache war party riding toward his ranch was enough to chill any man's bones. Yalin clung to her sister, panicked, insisting they leave so Matthew wouldn't suffer because of them. But Matthew shook his head. He would not send two wounded girls into the wild again. Instead, he told them both firmly that no one, not even an Apache chief, would change the truth. They were safe, untouched, and protected under his roof. Atsila stared at him a long moment, as if measuring the weight of his words, then finally nodded. Together, they cleaned the house, made the story clear, and waited. By sunset, distant thunder of hooves filled the horizon. The sun was bleeding out behind the mountains, when 150 Apache warriors emerged from the desert like a tide of silent shadows. Their painted horses moved in flawless formation, faces stern, spears raised like a forest of steel. Matthew stood on his porch, hands visible, heart thundering, but posture calm. At their center rode a towering man with iron-gray braids, proud posture, and eyes like a storm chief Yiska himself. The warriors fanned out around the ranch, surrounding it with no room to escape. Yiska dismounted with a grace both regal and dangerous. His gaze drifted past Matthew as if he were nothing more than dust until he saw his daughter step out from behind him. Both unharmed, both fed, both alive. The chief's breath hitched, and a dozen emotions flickered across his stern face. Relief, love, shock, but they vanished when his eyes snapped back to Matthew. "Why are they in your home?" he demanded. The warriors tightened their grips on their weapons. Matthew's voice was steady as he explained everything: the storm, the injuries, the bed he offered so they could rest while he slept on the floor. Yiska's jaw tightened, unreadable. The sisters confirmed the story in Apache, speaking quickly. The tension hung thick, but then Yiska slowly exhaled and stepped back. Still, the warriors didn't lower their spears. This wasn't a rescue anymore. It was an interrogation of honor, and the wrong word could ignite a war right there on Matthew's land. Asterisk under the moonlight. Chief Yiska ordered Matthew to stand before the warriors in a semicircle, a traditional trial of truth to determine a stranger's intentions. Atsila tried to intervene, insisting Matthew had saved them, but Yiska raised a hand. Apache custom demanded clarity, not emotion. Matthew stood tall as the chief asked him questions, sharp, piercing ones about honor, respect, purity, intentions toward the sisters, and the boundaries of his hospitality. Each answer Matthew gave was calm, sincere, and unwavering. He admitted his solitude, acknowledged their vulnerability, repeated that he touched them only to carry them to safety and tend their wounds. At one point, an elder stepped forward with burning sage, circling Matthew and chanting, searching for signs of deceit. The smoke drifted through the air, curling around him like the judgment of ancient spirits. Atsila watched with her fists clenched, every muscle tense. Yelene trembled beside her, but Matthew didn't flinch. When the ritual ended, the old warrior declared, "His spirit does not tremble," the circle murmured. Yiska studied Matthew in long silence, then nodded once. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it shifted the air entirely. The trial was over. The stranger had passed. Asterisk, the warriors relaxed their stances, lowering their weapons for the first time since they arrived. Yiska approached Matthew closer this time, his expression no longer sharp with suspicion, but weighted with something deeper. "Few men," the chief said, "would offer their bed to strangers and sleep on the floor." Matthew brushed it off as simple decency, but the sisters shook their heads. They knew men who preyed on weakness, and ones who pretended kindness for darker reasons. Matthew was neither. Yiska offered him a beautifully carved talisman, a symbol of honor rarely given to outsiders. The warriors murmured in approval, acknowledging Matthew as a protector of their blood. Atsila stepped forward, thanking him with a gentle touch on his arm, her eyes bright with sincerity. Yalin hugged him without hesitation, which startled him more than the warriors had. Yiska allowed it with a faint smile, tugging at the edge of his stern expression. The tension eased so completely that some warriors even laughed quietly, sharing relieved words with the sisters. Matthew, still dazed, finally breathed freely. But Yiska then asked a question that froze him again. "Will you ride with us tomorrow?" Matthew blinked. "Why?" The chief's voice was grave. "Those who hunted my daughters are still out there." At dawn, Matthew mounted one of the Apache horses. Riding alongside warriors who once aimed spears at his chest, Atsila rode near him, guiding him through the terrain. The warriors spread across the desert in a sweeping formation until they found what they were searching for: tracks belonging to the band of hunters who had chased the sisters. The pursuit was relentless. They rode for hours through canyons and scorched plains until the predators' camp came into view to tear tents, stolen goods, and men who looked like they lived off cruelty. The warriors attacked in a coordinated storm, swift and precise, while Matthew stuck close to Atsila, protecting her flank. The fight was brief but fierce. The hunters didn't stand a chance against trained Apache warriors seeking vengeance for their chief's children. When it was over, the sisters stood together, staring at the defeated men who had hunted them. Atsila lifted her chin, reclaiming her power. Yalin held Matthew's hand in silent gratitude. Yiska placed a hand on Matthew's shoulder. You ride like a man who has lost much, but refuses to stop giving. That sentence stayed with Matthew long after the dust settled. When the warriors escorted the sisters home, Matthew expected nothing more than a farewell and perhaps a distant memory. Instead, after settling his daughters safely inside their camp, Yiska approached him with calm finality. A man who protects my blood is welcome among my people. The warriors nodded, acknowledging Matthew as someone tied to their tribe through honor, not birth. Atsila walked up to him, her expression softer than ever. You gave us safety when we had none, she said quietly. You are part of our story now. Yalin hugged him again, insisting he visit often, promising to keep his talisman clean and tied with fresh beads. Yiska invited him to share a meal before he left. As night fell over the Apache camp, Matthew felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of belonging. Not forced by blood or duty, but earned through goodness. When he finally rode home, he looked back once and saw Atsila watching from the ridge, her silhouette framed by the firelight. A silent promise of friendship, and perhaps something deeper, waiting to bloom. Matthew had offered his bed to two exhausted strangers, unaware that the act would lead him into the heart of a people who would one day call him family. And in the quiet desert night, beneath the endless stars, he realized that sometimes a single act of kindness can echo louder than any war cry.